Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering something unbelievable. The US dollar is no longer the world's reserve currency. Your country's debt, global oil prices, international trade, everything is suddenly calculated in a completely different currency. At first, it sounds impossible, almost ridiculous,
global trade is
but
evolving.
right now,
Shipping routes and
a
cargo
group
are now
of
priced in
powerful
euros, yen, and
countries
pounds.
is
This
quietly
reduces reliance on
exploring
the
a
dollar.
future where
Observe the
that
dashboard.
exact
A new currency
scenario
symbol now
becomes
controls global
real.
trade, energy, and finance.
They call
This unifies these
themselves
sectors under one
BRICS.
system.
And depending on
What's
who
this
you
weird
ask,
symbol
they
everywhere?
are either
It's like it took
building
over the whole
future of
map,
global
and my wallet's
finance
empty.
or chasing a dream
The European
that can
markets
never
show a
actually
2%
happen.
dip, but Asia is
Here's
up,
the
especially tech.
uncomfortable truth
We need to
most
hedge.
people don't
These are the
hear.
BRICS nations, pillars of a
The
powerful
US
economic
dollar
alliance.
has
They are
had an
interconnected in a
almost
vast global trade
unfair
network.
advantage
Their
for
future looks
nearly
bright.
80 years. Not because America always earned it, but because the entire global financial system
Let's pull back
was
the curtain on the
literally
global
designed
financial
around
system.
it.
It's a complex
After
network,
World War
all
II,
centered around the
United
dollar.
States
The dollar
controlled
has
about
dominated
2/3
international
of the
trade
world's
and
gold
finance for
supply.
decades,
That
providing a
gave it
long-term
enormous
advantage.
leverage when global leaders gathered to rebuild the financial system. The agreement was simple. Global trade would run through the dollar. Oil, wheat, steel, copper, all of it priced in a currency that only one country could create. Think about that for a moment. Every country in the world needed dollars to buy the basic resources their economies depended on. That is not just a financial system. That is a structural advantage bordering on monopoly. For decades, governments complained quietly about this arrangement, but no one had the power to challenge it. Until now, because BRICS is not a small alliance. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and recently the group expanded. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and UAE have joined the conversation. Together, they represent almost 45% of the world's population and roughly a third of global economic output. But more importantly, they control massive portions of the world's critical resources: oil, natural gas, rare earth minerals, gold, agriculture. In other words, the raw materials that keep the global economy running. So the real question isn't whether BRICS has power. They clearly do. The question is whether power alone is enough to replace something as deeply embedded as the US dollar. To understand why this is difficult, you have to understand what the dollar actually does in the global economy. Every single day, trillions of dollars move across borders through a financial messaging network called SWIFT. This system allows banks in different countries to send money to each other instantly. And because most global transactions are settled in dollars, countries need access to US currency just to participate in international trade. Economists call this dollar dependency. Even countries that dislike American policies still need dollars. They need them to buy oil. They need them to repay international debt. They need them to import food and technology. Russia learned this lesson dramatically in 2022. After the invasion of Ukraine, Western governments froze roughly $300 billion of Russian foreign reserves. Those funds weren't destroyed, but they were suddenly inaccessible. And the message was crystal clear. If your wealth is stored in dollar-based systems, the United States ultimately has control over the lock. For many countries, that moment changed everything. Suddenly, the discussion about alternatives was no longer theoretical. It became about sovereignty. This is when BRICS leaders started discussing a new idea, a potential BRICS currency, a shared unit that could settle trade between member countries without touching the US dollar. Financial media exploded with headlines. Some analysts predicted the end of dollar dominance. Others warned about a financial war. But then something interesting happened. Nothing. No currency launched, no timeline announced, no central bank was created. Because designing a shared currency is incredibly complicated. One currency means one monetary policy, one interest rate, one inflation target, one financial rulebook for every member country. And BRICS economies are wildly different. China is a manufacturing superpower. India is a fast-growing developing economy. Brazil depends heavily on commodities. Russia operates under sanctions. South Africa faces structural unemployment. Setting one monetary policy for all of them would be extraordinarily difficult. Europe struggled with this exact challenge when it created the euro, and European economies were far more integrated than BRICS countries are today. So instead of replacing the dollar overnight, BRICS countries are taking a slower path. They are building alternatives piece by piece. China and Russia now conduct much of their trade in yuan and rubles. China and Brazil have agreed to settle some trade directly in their own currencies. Saudi Arabia has experimented with selling oil in yuan instead of dollars. None of these moves collapse the dollar, but together they slowly reduce dependence on it. Think of it like small cracks forming in a very large dam. So here's the real question. Will BRICS actually replace the US dollar? In the next 5 years, probably not. The dollar remains the most trusted and liquid currency on Earth. But history shows that global financial systems do change. The British pound once dominated global trade. Before that, Spanish silver controlled international commerce. Every monetary system eventually faces competition. And right now, BRICS is the first serious attempt in decades to challenge the dollar's position. So I want your honest opinion. Do you believe the US dollar will still be the world's dominant currency 20 years from now? Or are we watching the early stages of a shift toward a different financial system? Comment "dollar stays" if you think the US dollar will remain dominant. Comment "BRICS rising" if you believe BRICS could eventually challenge it. I genuinely want to see where people stand on this.